This is the Emotion Connection, where you'll experience health through feeling. Explore emotion from a different perspective and learn how to use your emotions to improve your day-to-day life. Introducing your host, founder of the Emotion Research Institute and creator of Emotional Strength, Sharon Fay. Sharon heads up a successful business empowering leaders to bring about organisational development and cultural change. Get your senses ready as we delve into the many facets of emotion together. Over to Sharon.
Hello, I'm Sharon Fay. Emotion is my thing. And today's podcast is about the myth of negative emotion. And this is quite a difficult topic to talk about and to understand. So I'm going to start today with a story that I was asked to give a keynote talk to a corporate, and everyone was lovely, everyone was excited about me being there, and it was a wonderful experience. And in that keynote, it was all going fine until I used the example of anger. And my example of anger was that the emotion anger is kind of like a feeling that comes up from your feet, comes all the way up your body. When you're feeling it, when you're in your body, you can feel it, and it goes up into your jaw and your head, and then it kind of gets stuck there, but we want it to go all the way through. And I was talking to this group about anger and what it feels like, because most of us have shut anger down a long time ago because we've judged it as bad. And I'm challenging that view that anger is bad because it's an energy coming up through your body, and we don't want to get that mixed up with acting out or behavior. Behavior is like yelling or going silent, or sort of feeling like you want to punch someone. That is violence if you're wanting to punch someone. The other acting out is aggression. So when I'm talking about anger, and I will use anger as an example because it seems to be an extreme example that people get worried about, I am not talking about behavior, about aggression, or about acting out. That is a different thing to feeling the emotion. I didn't explain that as clearly as I'm explaining to you today in the keynote. And afterwards, there were young people in the audience that were concerned that I was condoning violence and aggression, which I was not. And that's why I've called it the myth of negative emotion, because these young people had the idea that this emotion called anger was the same as behavior, the same as acting out, the same as aggression. And I'm saying it's very different. The behavior is different to the emotion. The emotion doesn't even, in the research, we can see that the anger doesn't even cause the behavior directly. It's just that it is more likely to move from the emotion to the behavior, but it's not necessary. And I'll show you ways throughout this podcast about how you can feel an emotion, and you can know that when your capacity reaches you're beyond your capacity to feel, especially negative emotion like anger or sadness or anxiety, when it becomes outside of our capacity, we're more likely to act out. But if you have awareness and you're aware that you're acting out, you can say, stop, I realized that I've gone beyond the energy of emotion. Now I'm going into behavior, and I want to stop that before it gets any worse. So there's lots of things that I'll go through today about how for you to understand this complex topic of the myth of negative emotion. That story is an example of how emotion gets a bad rap, and especially negative emotion. And the reason I continue to use negative emotion is for communication. So if I just called everything emotion, you wouldn't be able to understand what I'm talking about. If I say negative emotion, then you'll understand that that could be anger, anxiety, or sadness, because they're the only ones we judge to be negative. You won't hear me very often talk about positive emotion because that's just emotion. If you wanted some extra reading on it, you might have noticed that I've written a blog on this topic as well that you can read on the Clear Perceptions blog page. The myth of negative emotion is challenging the idea that negative emotion is bad. And this episode highlights that human beings live life with a series of underlying assumptions that have been repeated so many times that it's become the truth. And when I say so many times, it could be so many times in your head, in your speaking with people. It's just repeated often in multiple ways. The first step is to challenge your own assumptions that are unconscious. They could be conscious as well, but mainly they're unconscious when you first bring your awareness to this. So challenging your own assumptions raises your awareness and is the start of your healing journey. The first question you might ask me is, what are our assumptions? And it's a good question. So as I said, they may be conscious or unconscious, but typically unconscious, I believe. They're deeply held beliefs developed over your life. So you might have developed these truths in your early life or throughout your life, at work, lots of different ways you can develop these truths. You've repeated them so many times in your head that it's just the way the world is. And when it's just the way the world is, it's no longer challenged, it's accepted. There are lots of everyday examples, like, she is a naughty child. I know my partner. I've been married for 30 years and I know my partner very well. That's a myth. And that is just the way my mother is. Well, you may have known your mother all your life, but you actually don't know who she is. You only know what she's allowed you to see. These things are challenging, I know. I'm a good driver is another myth, because if you had someone in the passenger seat while you were driving, you may not get that feedback. I am stupid is another myth, and for those of us who have thought that to be the truth, you can see how it's affected our life when we have a truth, deeply ground truth, ingrained truth, that I'm stupid. It affects the way you behave in the world, it affects the way you communicate in the world, it affects your education, it affects what you can and can't do. These are assumptions. So when you hear me use the word assumptions, they're underlying assumptions. That there are some examples. Now, I'm not saying that underlying assumptions are correct or incorrect, because then we would be in that dichotomous world. I'm saying that the underlying assumptions are repeated so many times that you accept them as fact. You no longer question it, and the truth lives in your unconscious mind, hidden from your view often. Negative emotion has been accused of causing all kinds of stress-related issues. Over time, negative emotion has been called unwholesome. Back in the old days, that's a word from the past, unwholesome. destructive, quite strong, unpleasant, hostile. And the assumption is that we need to manage these uncomfortable feelings or get rid of them altogether. Other theorists say we need to regulate our emotion, and some of the ways we have been taught to regulate is by avoiding, suppressing, distracting, denying, deceiving, or just vacate the building and leave your body. Academic language used in the literature is that emotion can be evaluated or appraised. There's some academic words. They're evaluated or appraised as pleasant or unpleasant, which elicits positive and negative affect. Affect is an academic word just referring to emotion. These words and this research was done around the turn of the 20th century, and Solomon and Stone, 2002, they used that kind of language, which I won't use, but I will use the word judgment in place of that, because judgment is something that we all know and understand. I use judgment a lot. So anger has been regarded as both a vice and bad for your health. So this is all around the beginning of the 21st century, in 2001. And this was still regarded, this is quite recent, and it's still regarded as a vice and bad for your health. Many of us grew up seeing the world through a dichotomous lens. That is, we see the world in two dimensions. We've got right or wrong, good or bad, success or failure, either that one or that one. There's only two options in dichotomous thinking. Now, you will hear me use the word dichotomous quite a lot because to me it makes the most sense of these two dimensions. It's a two-dimensional world. It's polar opposites. There's lots of terminology to describe a dichotomous lens. So we're looking out through our eyes and we're seeing the world through a dichotomy, which is two options. Now we know that's not true because it may be good as a shortcut, but we know it's not true because there are so many other options. There are lots of grey areas in life and so many things that science can't explain. Dichotomous thinking is becoming old, and it's become a very limiting factor in our growth because we only see these two options. So I'll say a little bit about dichotomous thinking. We're in the habit of seeing the world this way. So you might ask, well, what's the problem with that? It's a good question. The main problem with this type of thinking is that there are only two options. As I said, good, bad, right, wrong, either or, success, failure. We've got health or sickness. There's so many of them, it goes on forever. And the other negative emotion is, well, anxiety. So what if anxiety is not bad? What if we can use anxiety to perform better? Anxiety can provide us with high energy to get things done. Although there is one catch with anxiety. If anxiety exceeds levels beyond our capacity to feel, then we experience a performance drop, or worse, we may act out. And I spoke about acting out behaviour before. That's when we act out, when we're exceeding our capacity to feel. So then other theorists say, well, and this is still at the turn of the 21st century, is there such a thing as negative emotion? It was a question asked by Christensen in 2001. And this body of research is suggesting that there's no such thing as negative emotion. Well, that's interesting, because negative emotion is just a negative evaluation of certain emotion. So once again, I use the word judgment. It's a negative evaluation, judgment, same thing, right? And then a quote from Solomon Stone again says, the circumstances provoking emotion may be bad, because we'll judge them as bad, but the emotion itself may not be. Already at the turn of the 21st century, theorists and scholars are pulling apart our assumptions that we've held over the past 3,500 years. The distinction between the circumstances that provoked emotion versus the emotion itself is important to understand. The emotion itself feels like energy in your body, and when you are learning how to feel, you tend to think about the feeling, rather than feeling it directly in your body. So I said to a little girl on the weekend, you've got lots of energy in your body, because you could see she was moving and her behaviour was showing us. And I said, can you feel that? And she said, no, I can't feel that. So it is quite challenging to feel directly in your body, rather than I think I'm sad because my great aunt died. Well, but what does sadness feel like in your body directly? So it might be sadness for me, it's different for everyone, but for me it's a sort of a slight ache in my chest, and if I feel that sadness, that ache in my chest, it just disappears. It's just very quick. It doesn't hang around. If I feel the ache in my chest when I'm sad, and I judge the ache in my chest to be bad, or I'm having a heart attack, or I need to go to the doctor, get my vitals tested, then that will stay around, that feeling, that ache in your chest will stay around a lot longer, for perhaps hours, days or weeks, because you're thinking about the feeling rather than feeling it yourself. I'll come back to that quite a lot, because that's quite a complex thing, thinking about feeling versus feeling directly in your body. You might think, well, the goal here is to build capacity for all emotion. We take away the positive and negative out of emotion and feel that energy in your body. So in other words, you keep practicing feeling in your daily life. You build more and more capacity to feel all kinds of sensations in your body. And you start to notice that sometimes you will be more skilled at feeling than other times. You will also come and go. In other words, you might feel in one moment and numb in the next moment. And you'll feel and numb and feel and numb. I call that coming and going, and that's normal. We can't stay in our bodies 24/7. We will come and go. We'll go to our thinking, we'll go to our sensory, we'll go to our feelings, we'll go to our intuitive sense. An example of acting out is that you might feel sad, that aching in your chest, or it might be different for you. Then you go and overeat. So you want something sweet. So you pig out on donuts or something, which can be self-soothing at the time, so you're feeling better in the short term. But in the long term, of course, you gain weight and then you're not happy. There are trade-offs there. As you practice feeling, you will be able to feel a negative emotion as we judge it without acting out or binging. Binging behaviour could be with anything: food, alcohol, drugs, TV, screens. That's usually indicating that you're exceeded your capacity to feel that emotion. And binging behaviour is an example of what I call leaving your body. So for instance, if you're having breakfast and you're reading the paper. Your body won't register the food that you've put in there. So when you finish your breakfast and you fold up the paper, ready for work, you'll be still hungry. When you sit there and have breakfast without reading the paper and feeling the food in your mouth, feeling your jaw, it's masticating, it's working, feeling it going down into your stomach bowl, then your body starts to register the food and will feel full. So you're not going to overeat. If you're scrolling on your phone while you're eating breakfast or you're having a snack, the body won't register that you've had anything and you'll want more while you're scrolling. So that's a bit of a trap. People leave their bodies when the emotion or the sensation becomes too intense, because some people's bodies are intense. My body's very intense. By too intense, I mean when the emotional sensation is beyond your capacity. So everyone's got a different capacity, and I've got quite a large capacity, and I still move beyond my capacity at times when I get triggered. That just means that you need to practice building more capacity. You're not at the end, you just are going to practice and build more. And we use all kinds of numbing behaviours to reduce the emotion or the tension in our bodies, and this is quite normal, that numbing behaviour. Once again, I'm always saying to you guys that it's not wrong to avoid or numb or leave your body. It's quite normal. But we just want to come back as soon as we can to our bodies because there's lots of things going on there. So when you're interested in living an awake life, numbing behaviours actually reduce when you're practicing. You'll be able to feel any emotion without having to leave your body. And that is something that I'm still practicing, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing, wonderful life to feel your emotion without making it wrong. So as your capacity increases, it gets easier to feel and it becomes a useful habit. We're always in habits, but we want a useful habit rather than a damaging habit. Also, you start to trust your feelings. So you might say that I've trusted my feelings in the past, but they've let me down. Well, I would suggest, without knowing the circumstances, that you're not actually feeling if they've let you down. You might be thinking about feeling. You might have felt something in a moment and acted out. That will let you down. So there's lots of ways that you can explain that without blaming the feelings. And I suggest that when you practice, remember this emotion is momentary. It's very short. So if I feel sad and I feel that ache in my chest and I just focus on it, then it's gone. Something else will come in, but that particular one's gone. If I feel angry on a scale of 1 to 10, and I feel angry with 1's being minimal anger and 10's rage, then I can say to you, I actually feel angry at an 8 right now, and with that I'm informing you I'm not acting out. I'm letting you know that the anger in me is very high right now, and that is very helpful for people to know that. Yeah, and it's good to remember also, I haven't mentioned this yet, but I just wanted to make the point that I am always talking about normal feelings. I am not referring to clinical problems here. These are normal feelings, normal experiences. People who have other issues, they will go and talk to health professionals and people that are working in that area. I am just talking about everyday life. And there are many myths that people live by that have become the truth. The myth that some emotions are negative or bad misses the benefit of feeling. We are human, we need to learn how to feel. Feeling often gets mixed up with suffering, and people have suffered enough. We don't need any more suffering in the world, for sure. In my experience, the benefit of feeling and connecting to your body is, I believe, we cannot hurt ourselves or anyone else if we are in our bodies feeling. Our feeling systems are essential for humans to navigate safely through the challenges of life. So when you're building some expertise in being in your body and feeling, then that keeps you safe as well. To recap, it's common for people to assume that there is such a thing as negative emotions and that they're bad. There is lots of research on the topic of negative emotions. I believe, and I will always say, that all emotions are functional even if we judge them. Their emotions started for a reason, and we can go into that in more detail at another time. And the goal is to change your perception of negative emotion and to build a capacity, or at least begin to build a capacity to feel in your daily life. So that leads us to your homework. It's quite a difficult piece of homework, but those who are up for a challenge can take it on. Test yourself to identify your underlying assumptions. Now, well, what does that mean? It sounds all very hard. Let me give you a tip. Start by observing your behaviour in any given moment. So your behaviour will alert you to the assumptions that you're making. For instance, if you find yourself speaking in an encouraging tone with a child that you empathise with, or then on the other hand you can speak in a curt tone with a child that irritates you, then that tells you what your assumptions are about each child. The same principle applies to staff at work. So next time you find you have a short or curt tone in your voice, notice the assumption you are making about that child or that person. Once again, I would love to hear your questions about this difficult topic, and as I've said before, Q&A are my favourite thing to do. The next podcast is talking about a very important understanding and topic is emotional strength. Is it the missing link? And we'll see you next time.
Well, that's a wrap. The Emotion Connection is produced by Sharon Fay and her team at the Emotion Research Institute. With a vision to help people feel, this is just one way we're spreading the word. From our hub in Perth, Western Australia, our goal is to advance global research on human emotion and bring together the world's best scholars to conduct rigorous research into emotion all in one place. Would you like to help? Do you have feedback or suggestions? We'd love to hear from you. Visit emotionresearch.com.au to get in touch, sign up to our newsletter and learn more. If you'd like to support our work, make a donation. Remember, your generosity fuels our vision and contributions over $2 Australian are tax deductible. See you next time.